and thank you for having me today. I'm just going to give an overview of some of the main creative thinking and some of the technologies and some of the ideas that has helped our university. So I've been with this journey for a long time. So I think with Clayton and Alexa, we can give you some experience of our journey. So just to give you an overview of the creative economy, this is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the cultural and creative industries, or CCIs in the UK. I'm then going to talk about some of the approach over the last, I guess, 25 years. So it's a long process. And in that, I'm going to give you some names, some thinkers, and also some innovation trends towards the creative economy, some of the ways we learn, and some of the big societal changes that are happening. And there may be a few ideas or guesses about what's next for the creative industries. So, to summarize, some of the big thinking that's taken place in our UK over the last few years. So, the sector didn't really exist until 1997, and we set up a department for culture, media and sport, which helped define the CCIs as an economic sector and as a cluster. Some of the key thinking towards this were the work of communities of practice, where people across the world share common values and skills. And then the next, I guess, big theoretical drive was from Richard Florida, who talked about the creative class. And this could be of interest to you guys, because it's about how creatives tend to thrive in cities and go from city to city. He called them global digital nomads. In other words, these creative individuals are quite mobile and can go where they can find the common thinking and common people to them. This was okay for a while, but the next, I guess, big intervention was around the creative city, because it's okay being a digital nomad, but you've got to live somewhere, right? And you live in a community. We don't live as an island. And Charles Landry started talking about the creative city. In other words, what are the conditions to make your city creative? And he started talking about creative growth, and for the first time, diversity. So creative cities are diverse cities that bring people in. And this was followed up by a guy called Franco Bianchini, who was again from the UK. That he has an Italian, obviously, background. But he was saying, under some of the creative economy, everyone was treating everything as the same. And this is clearly not the case. Every city has its own distinctive character, its own district, its history, its people, its industries. And every city and town is different. And you can't just have a template and put this on your city and say, hey, do this, 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 and hello, bingo, you have a creative city. That doesn't work. And at the same time, there was a lot of discussion in the mainstream sectors about open innovation. And a guy called Henry Chesborough was talking about how the creative economy could catalyze other sectors. So some of the trends, I guess, following that, which I guess influenced BCU, and Clayton and Alexa will discuss this in detail, but I think it's worth remembering where these came from. So the creative industries are seen as catalysts for innovation and growth. in other words, they are themselves growth sectors, but their main, a key focus for them is to look at what we call cross-innovation. And I've given an example there, and Clayton will talk about some of these examples, but where you get the creative economy and maybe it's the sector like health, so catalyzing change. And again, in this period, 2010 to 2020, we had things called co-working spaces. Now, you might have these in your cities and towns. That we call them serendipity spaces, where people who've got similar ideas and thinking hang out. And it's interesting to see where are those spaces. And if they don't exist in your town, maybe you should create one, because that's where creativity and innovation tends to happen, by people mixing together. So, as well as this thinking about creativity, there was another, I guess, philosophy which is around design thinking. And this really says we need to put the customer or the citizen at the heart of how we do things. And Stanford and California were really big on this, and I'm sure you've heard of this, and we will cover it today, but challenge-based developments. In other words, it's saying, let's see where societal challenges are, or where we need to fix problems. And let's start from there, rather than having technology to then find a solution. Let's find a problem, a challenge, and then we can think about in an interdisciplinary way how we can do this. In the States, they took, this is design thinking, but they also started STEAM, or arts and technology. And it was seen as a way of involving artists actually in some of the more technical aspects which they were being shut out of. I mean, Obama in the early in this period was spending a lot of money on STEM and technology, and the artists and creatives said, hey, that's fine, but you're cutting out some of the most important people in your society, the artists and the creatives. And we will talk a lot about that. It was a big influence on our university and a big influence on what you'll hear later. So some societal changes. I won't go into detail. If you want to, I can talk about this and give you references later. But some of the things that happened in the UK and in Europe, there was a lot of regeneration of urban spaces, and there's been a big growth of co-working, fab labs, and maker spaces. There's a guy called Marcuse that called it sticky spaces. In other words, where would you like to go? I mean, is your city a place that you would want to stay? Are there places that you would find like-minded people like yourself where you could do innovation? And this kind of led to the millennials and Generation X and millennials, who've got probably a desire for individuality and meaning through their work. So they want some purpose in how they work now, rather than just a 9-to-5 job. And then the other main social thing was this thing about breaking down silos and working with diaspora in your city. In other words, trying to find ways across different cultures. And again, you'll come onto this in this masterclass. I'm just going through this because, as well as these societal and technological changes, we need to be aware of how people work and think. So I'll just pick out a couple here. The whole notion of action learning is important, and we'll do some of that today. It's how you solve problems through taking action and then reflecting and talking about the results. Looking at how different sectors and subgroups have distinctive identities. By this I mean artists maybe have a different language than, say, engineers. They dress differently, they hang out in different places. You've got to understand how these groups behave to help them work together. Otherwise, you'll have many conversations that don't work. And then another, I guess, a big thing for us, as we'll try today, is reflection, and how you you've heard something, you think about something, you reflect on it, and then you start again. In other words, this idea of a double loop, you don't just do one thing and then move on, but you reflect. So cross innovation, we're just doing, again, just picking up, this is a big thing for us. And again, I think it's something to consider in terms of how different sectors address key challenges. We've seen this as a way, I've characterized it here as saying how science parks work with the creative economy. I mean, sometimes they don't work at all. You have science parks in one part of the city, and you have creative hubs in other parts. And what the BCU has tried to do is really connect the two together, so you get more innovation by connecting these two different parts. And again, we've thought new products and services, looking at how the creative economy brings real value to other sectors, new ways of looking at things. I raised this slide because this is how we started. We did some very simple, and if you go to the next slide, Clayton, we started with a simple grid. This is a real example that we did, I think, in 2014, maybe 2015. And if you were thinking of working with other sectors and working with other people, it's a way of doing this. So on the left-hand side, you have the so-called traditional sectors. And on the top of the grid, there are some creative sectors. And these are some of the sectors. There may be others in your town. And it was a way of seeing which sectors are most likely to work with each other. So the ones that are red are the most likely and want to, if you like, it's a desire to work with the other sector. And I think it's a quick way of finding some people to work with as you're starting some of this interdisciplinary work. Just something on design thinking. We'll be doing a lot of that today. Excuse me. We're looking at really looking at how you empathize. In other words, how do you listen to people? How do you understand their problems, their issues? How you define the problem together, then doing some brainstorming on that problem. And then importantly, prototyping an idea. In other words, what is a good way forward? A simple prototype, and then to test that in the environment. And that's a really good, this is from Stanford's D School, but it's a very simple set of techniques with a lot of skills beneath it. And just to give you an example, I mentioned STEAM just in the USA. I mean, we did a USA study tour. I think that's the thing to say. It's great if you have the opportunity to see other creative hubs, other creative environments. It was a great stimulus to us. We went to the States. This was based on something we saw in New York. And this was 2016, and we already found, as our university, that there were all these different groups of STEAM associations set up by students in all the major universities in the US. So we quickly knew that this was an idea that's major in the States, and we then adapted that to how that would work in Birmingham. And then I'm just going to end with some ideas, really, because time is short today. But just to give you, I guess, what is influencing BCU now, and just to share some of these with you. We all know there are global trends now. I've called them shocks. Some of the globalization has had a real issue. We use the word resilience. In other words, are you able to supply stuff locally if you need to? And I think one of the things that we're doing is looking at transnationality, as we're doing with you today, but also looking at local approaches and mapping, what we call mapping supply chains, And I've said proximity matters. It does matter that you're located close to others who are working with you. There's an interdisciplinary world everywhere in work and education, and focusing on diversity is a helpful way, and embracing diversity. In the UK, we're spending a lot of time on, I'm sure you are too, on sustainable growth. In other words, not just growth with no consequences, but green growth, and how do you grow in communities? And as I've given you a reference there, Kate Raworth has done a lot of work in this in the UK. And then I guess the biggest, I think, issue, opportunity, some say a threat, is transdisciplinary approaches, including probably AI as well as, but AI is a big one, even in the last few weeks, months. And this is where cross-innovation and interdisciplinary thinking has actually added a whole new way of doing things that didn't even exist before. And it's opening our eyes to the potential for new thinking. So that's, I hope through this very brief overview, I've given you some, if you like, some key ideas which have influenced our thinking and continue to influence our thinking. It is a journey for us. There isn't, the end point is not there. There isn't an end point. So we're really keen to work with others about how we develop these ideas in the next 4 or 5 years. But some of the philosophy is with us, of course it is, and the way we think, our thinking has been influenced. So hopefully you've seen some of the key ideas that have helped us get to where we are. And now I'm going to pass to Clayton and Alexa to describe some, if you like, some case studies of where we've come to and how we got there. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Steve. So I'll continue with this part of the presentation. So I'm going to just talk about STEAMhouse, which is the manifestation of STEAM. So where we talk about science, technology, engineering, arts and maths as STEAM. STEAMhouse is what we've done locally here in the UK in Birmingham to put that into action. So I shall move on from here. So about STEAMhouse, just a little bit about the building that we're currently in. It's actually an old bicycle tyre manufacturing factory that was destroyed by fire in the 1990s. And it was part of the Industrial Revolution. The building itself is well over 100 years old. And forms part of Birmingham's industrial past. And one thing that we really love about the building here is that we have taken part of Birmingham's industry and brought it into the modern era. So it's almost like a factory of innovation. So here you can see some of the fire-based damage that made the building sit empty for at least 20 years before we brought it back to life. We opened the building last year in 2022. So we have this Centre for Collaborative Innovation, we call it STEAMhouse. Within it, we have a space for innovation prototyping through a form of a maker space. We call it a production space. We also have facilities in digital technologies such as virtual reality and augmented reality. We have an incubator for startup businesses. We have a studio for artists and creatives. We have spaces for our academics to be positioned here, and also for students to be located here for some of their learning and courses. We also have relationships with corporate organisations. So we have tenants that are going to be based here. They're not here yet, as we're still developing the building. But also zones within the usually in the central part of the building, all the way throughout the 5 floors, where we really encourage collaboration. So we have co-working spaces, event spaces, places where we can run workshops as well. We also have a community platform for all of the members that are part of STEAMhouse as well. So in terms of what STEAM is, it's a place where we bring together all of these disciplines. So we have the disciplines which I mentioned previously, but as more than just being interdisciplinary across those areas of science, technology, engineering, arts and maths, it's also about bringing people together from different communities, from the business community, from the student and academic community, and also trying to encourage a sense of collaboration and exploration, which can lead to greater levels of innovation locally. We also have these principles, which Alexa will talk about later on, which are around collaboration, conversation, exploration, newness and openness. So what we're trying to do is encourage a sense of working together, sharing, learning, giving, being very open in the approach, and also trying to do something which is in many ways radically different to what you might have been doing before. This is a quote from the Rhode Island School of Design. Steve mentioned about the influences that we had from the States. The Rhode Island School of Design says that STEAM is a movement which advocates for adding art and design to the national STEM agenda to develop the creativity and problem-solving skills necessary to foster economic growth and competitiveness in the coming century. And it's something which we still stand by as an approach that in order to really solve those societal issues, those big problems, and also look towards developing our economies, that we really embrace creativity as part of the broader subjects that are often prioritized over arts and creativity. Just a little bit on some of the regional context here and why STEAMhouse exists. One of the recent research exercises from our, it's called the Local Enterprise Partnership, or LEP, which is an administrative body, a kind of governmental administrative body, which demonstrated and showed that the region that we're in, that this city is in, was underperforming compared to other parts of the country. And also within this region, we also have a high level of creative industries, a growing sector of creative industries. So we looked to converge those thoughts, that thinking, so looking at how we can really work with the creative industries to encourage a greater sense and a greater level of innovation, and bringing creative industries, arts, other disciplines into those disciplines around engineering and technology, for example, to try and do something new. Also, historically, this city has always embraced the idea of multidisciplinary approaches. And this emblem that you see here is the emblem for Birmingham, which was produced maybe about 150 years ago, at the time when Birmingham was a really growing, flourishing city as part of that industrial revolution that we were right in the back of. And on the one side, you have the artist with the easel, and on the other side, you have the engineer. And the two together combined is a demonstration that all industries within the city are important and are given equal credit and equal weighting. So we like to think that we're continuing this history and this tradition of the city and being the university for the city that gives back to the city and supports local industry and local businesses. Just a small mention to where we started. So before we were in this current building, we had our own prototype, and prototyping we do consider to be very important. So this was our first prototype of STEAMhouse. It was in an old car dealership warehouse, which we converted to this concept of STEAMhouse. So we had within it a makerspace, co-working areas, meeting rooms, and an event space. And in that, we were able to test the idea, bring a community of people together, really try and encourage new thinking and new ideas to develop into some form of reality. And I'll just run through some of the case studies of the organisations, the businesses that we've been working with so far. Most of them, the majority of them, I should say, are small businesses, micro businesses, and over time we will be working with larger businesses as we've entered this new building that we're in now. So this is an example of it was basically a sole trader, a micro business, who worked for an architectural company, but he had ideas about creating his own business. He didn't know where to go. He came to STEAMhouse. He was very inquisitive and curious, and we were able to match him with some technical expertise that we have within STEAMhouse, and he really wanted to create new forms and new styles of chair. So relatively simple, but it was something that which he didn't have a lot of experience of. So we worked with him on the chair design, the concept, and also ideas on how he could then take it forward to manufacture. So here's one example. So then he moved from his existing business organization, I should say. So he moved from his existing organization, which was this architectural company, set up his own business, and then is now flourishing with his own Kenilworth chair. Similarly, we have here a creative who wanted to explore the use of different materials. So the material here unusually is made out of wood and cow manure. And it's an interesting one in that we are doing quite a lot of work around the use of bioavailable materials. So the use of materials such as algae and seaweed for the construction of new types of plastic that won't harm the environment. And we're also using old coffee grounds, for example, to create new coffee-based leathers, as well as the use of mushrooms to create leather as well, a type of suede leather. But this person is using cow manure to create very solid surfaces, and she's actually now going to be looking at taking this idea of using cow manure and using it for building and construction industries, so that it can be used in home building or whatever building materials might be needed for. So that's another example. This one is an example of somebody who had an idea to create a suit for people that do exercise, lots of exercise, but want to recover quickly. So within the suit, it has various areas, pockets where there are heated elements which can speed up the process of healing after vigorous exercise. And this one is quite an interesting one, where we had an inventor and a partner that was working with the inventor. I just call him the money man. He was the one that was always trying to find the investment, and he does very well at it. But they had this very radical idea to create a robot that can crawl up a wall and paint large surfaces of flat wall. And the idea behind that was to look at a solution that takes away the need to work at height using scaffolding, and as a result you reduce the cost and you reduce the danger from people falling from heights. So they created this wall climbing robot with us. So it's very much of an engineering heavy project. And they've now grown their business from 2 people. I think they're now about 30 staff members so far, and they've diversified their product. So it not only do they have a product that paints walls, but they can now survey in very difficult to reach areas, so they can send a robot up underneath a road bridge, underneath a motorway, for example, and scan for defects on a bridge. Again, you remove the need to close a road and work at height using scaffolding. And similarly, we've been working with multiple partners on projects that look at reducing the carbon footprint in homes. For example, here we had a number of partners that were contributing to looking at this idea around the use of heat pumps within homes and to reduce the carbon footprint, therefore. Something like this is important in that we're looking at these kind of global challenges. This works differently. We work with people together in more of a workshop-based environment. I'm going to scoot through some of these slides now because I'm going to run out of time otherwise. But just to let you know, we do things called STEAM sprints, and later on in the series of masterclasses, you'll be joined by one of my colleagues, Patrick Beck, who will talk through the sprint process, which is a form of methodological exploration to identify problems and come to solutions in a really quick period of time. We've also done quite a lot of work on working with our academics to identify societal problems. This one was during the COVID pandemic, looking at issues around lack of diversity within particular sectors and how to address that problem. We also look at developing the curriculum within the university around STEAM, and this is a longer term area of work. So we're changing the way that our academics are teaching students. Disciplines are still important. We respect all the disciplines that we have, but there's also modular activity where we can bring different disciplines from our faculties together. And also doing quite a lot of work on supporting governments, local councils around developing policy. And this is an example where we've been working with various European policy organisations around looking at maker spaces within their cities. We also have a conference that takes place each year, which you might be interested in. Happy to talk more on that one. And there are a number of toolkits. Alexa's going to go through a number of them next, but just so that you're aware, we have sprints, challenges, and STEAM labs. We do a lot of work around design thinking. We use a variety of different tools depending on the nature of the problem that we're trying to solve. And I'm now going to move over to Alexa to talk about toolkits.
Lovely. Thank you, Clayton, and thanks, Steve. Hello, everybody. Like Clayton said, I'm Alexa Hartwell. I'm head of the STEAM Academy at STEAMhouse. You've heard about our brilliant innovation centre. So my work is very much around how to embed STEAM practice across the university, working with academics and others to really look at developing methods and practice within STEAM and looking at STEAM education in particular. So you've heard about our brilliant innovation centre, and it's excellent. So it's a collective of a lot of businesses, startups, academics, students. It's really about trying to be accessible for everybody. And it's really trying to also allow people to work together in multidisciplinary teams to address complex real-world problems, as you've heard. So if you just want to go on to the next slide, please, Clayton. I'm going to be talking about the toolkits today, and I think it's just really important to say, we really have considered what allows for that STEAM environment to really flourish. And we've considered it a lot through all the different projects we've worked on. And we've recognized that these 5 key principles are really important when we run workshops. So we really try and encourage everyone to base their work in the workshops on these principles. So I'm going to run through them. So we've got conversation. We think it's really important to consider this idea of conversation. It's really about trying to allow yourself to be very collaborative in this space and really talk and to help really build that curiosity. So we want people to be very open. So just as Clayton shared before, I'll go through them. So it's conversation, exploration, collaboration, openness, and newness. So like I said, it's just the exploration part is really trying to help you to understand who each other is, who you're working with. Collaboration is really core part of what we do. It's really trying to get you to work together to generate new ideas and new thinking, to really be open in your environment. So not to have that closed way of kind of considering working, to really have that kind of open approach, which really does allow for that kind of unexpected ideas to happen and for those kind of serendipitous moments to occur as well, when you're very kind of open in how you approach things. And it's to really kind of think about kind of that newness and really trying to think about how can we innovate within this space? What are new ways to do things? So those are the 5 key principles. As we've spoken about already, design thinking is what we really base a lot of our work on, and what we have based a lot of our practice on. And we will be going through some tools with you. Design thinking works very well for us. It helps gather people together and really kind of consider some of these global issues, which we want STEAMhouse to be a space to be able to do that. So design thinking is a process. It's about solving problems by prioritizing customer needs. And it is really about looking at kind of that way of observing, empathizing, and interacting with your environments. It is different to just problem solving. And I think this is what's quite interesting for us. I'm sure a lot of you do design thinking already within your spaces. But it's this iterative process, design thinking. It's really about testing and keep kind of going over and reflecting, like Steve said earlier as well. We've got a little example here, Uber Eats. And I think it's quite interesting because they're saying, we could sit in San Francisco and just be in our office buildings, but no, we want to really immerse ourselves within the space of our customers and understand what they are. And that's why obviously they've done well and very successfully in how they've run their company. But, it's really about kind of immersing yourself in those environments, observing and understanding who that user is. So that's really key for when we're running any of our programs of work and when we are running our workshops. So this is quite a nice slide. It just gives you kind of the process of design thinking that we go through, which is I'm sure again that a lot of you recognize already. And it's Sanford School, which has kind of looked at this, and they've been brilliant at kind of recognizing that this tool really allows to help to get people to collaborate together and come up with new fantastic solutions to some of these big challenges that we're trying to face. So empathizing is the first one, and it's really about kind of immersing yourself with that environment. We've got tools where we kind of get people to really consider people in terms of like who that person is, who is the user that you're thinking about. And we will look at that in a bit. I will go through some of the tools, but it's really about how do you understand that user. So we do interviews, you observe, you really kind of try and work with those people to get that understanding, to get that empathy. Then it's about really defining what that challenge is. So what is the challenge that we're trying to define? And that this process is very important. I'm going to show you a tool which is called the problem tree, which is a way to be able to define a problem. And we hopefully will be able to go through that with you a little bit later. But yeah, it's a really important part of the process of design thinking to really be able to define what that problem is. And it can be quite an interesting thing to think, there's a lot of problems around these big global issues. So to be able to understand what that problem is very important. Then you've got ideate, which is really about how you generate new ideas around what that problem is that you've identified. And that is, again, that's quite a kind of divergent and convergent way of thinking. So you open and close some of this space. So in ideation, as you're probably aware, there's a lot of tools around this that we use as well. And it's how you kind of prioritize those ideas to make sure that you get the right solutions from this process. So ideate, again, is a very important part of the design thinking process. And then prototyping, as we said, is a really, really great stage because it allows you to kind of fail quickly and fast in a safe environment, in a safe environment with colleagues who are all kind of thinking about this idea that they want to kind of find solutions to. It's a very positive space. It feels quite a united space when we run these workshops at STEAMhouse. People are really keen to want to share ideas, be open, be new. And this part is really about kind of being very creative and making and doing some mock-ups and being able to, again, it's an iterative part of the process where, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work perfectly. You can try it again and test it again. And that's that bit again around testing, which is also evaluation. You're evaluating what works, what works well, what you understand as being important to be able to move it forward. And this is a design thinking process. And this is what we basically base a lot of our STEAM activity on. So, yeah, I think it's important to say, we've worked with a lot of these colleagues that we've kind of referenced here, Design Council, Stanford School, like we said, we've been really talking to them about the best ways to kind of incorporate some of this design thinking into our methods that we use at STEAMhouse. And as I said, there's a lot around this kind of divergent and convergent thinking. So you have a space where you really open up that thinking, which is around, when you're empathizing and immersing yourself in those environments to really understand who is that user of that global challenge. It's very important to understand that, to then be able to define what the challenge is that you're wanting to create that change. What is that challenge? And then ideating and prototyping and developing is, again, another very open part of the process where you're diverging your thinking, you're going quite large, you're really trying to kind of just be quite experimental. You're trying very creative part of the process where you're all working together in a very collaborative, very united, very excited way usually. And then again, you then converge your thinking and go to a bit more of a narrow thinking. You're trying to close it down, because if you're too open with your ideas all the time, you never get to a solution. So you try and close down a bit of your thinking to kind of validate and understand how to deliver and pitch some of those ideas. So that's, again, just going through a bit more detail of the design thinking process. And as we've mentioned, Design Council here, they actually were very responsible for some of the learning and tool frameworks which developed the double diamond, which is in the next slide, Clayton. And it's this double diamond which just gives you a lot more detail on what I'm talking about, really, when I'm saying about kind of that divergent and convergent thinking. I can go through it. I think it's quite, you can see all the different areas that it covers, which is really interesting. And I'd like to talk it through in a bit more detail when we meet a bit later. But again, it just shows you where the challenge and identifying that challenge comes in right at the beginning. It's then looking at that discovery stage and researching. It's again around this bit, the first bit of the diagram, really trying to synthesize and understand and discover and define what is that challenge. And really in that process, you are very much closing down that thinking and opening it up. And then it goes into thinking a bit more around how you develop those ideas and then pitch those ideas to get that solution. And it works very well for us. We've had some fantastic results. We've worked with a huge amount of businesses as well. And I feel like a lot of them really do benefit from kind of going through this process if they get stuck from in their business, from, you know, if even within their business context, if they've got a challenge that they want unpacking, this process really helps them to do that. Here are some tools that we use during our workshops. I was asked just to kind of share a few with you. Unfortunately, we can't go through them necessarily all together, but we might be able to just talk it through a little bit later. But I just wanted to give you some examples really at this stage. So this is basically a structured kind of reflective exercise. What we do is, we tend to use this reflective template when we are really at the beginning of our workshops. It's really to gather people's ideas, thoughts on what the challenge is. So we always present the challenge, we create a brief, and we ask people to really reflect on what that thinking is. And it's quite a structured approach, but it really helps people to kind of consider some of their thoughts in a very kind of safe environment. Nothing's right or wrong, and they can just jot down any of their thinking at that moment in time. And it is really helpful to get people talking and get people collaborating and to really kind of break that ice. So we use this exercise very much at the beginning of any process of the workshops. Then we have the problem tree. And the problem tree is a brilliant tool, actually. It's basically allows people to kind of really understand how to define the problem. I could go on about this template for a very long time because I think it's so important. And again, we will be going into this a little bit more later. The problem tree is really trying to understand what the causes of that problem are and then the impacts of that problem. And the hardest part of it is trying to define what the problem is. So you might have a large global issue around sustainability. Of course, there's huge issues around it. We will try and narrow it down, the challenge, but then it's really about each group. Usually we have people working in groups in a very collaborative way, trying to define what that problem is that they're trying to solve. And it's using this template that we do that. Again, like I said, I will be going into a bit more detail on this when we have our next session. And then we have the challenge canvas, which is just really trying to help individuals, again, give a bit more description around what the challenge is that they're actually trying to solve, using the process that we take them through. And it will give this template really allows them to kind of describe a bit more, working together, what the challenge is that they're wanting to work on. So rather than kind of unpacking and identifying the challenge, this is a little bit giving it more description around what the challenge is, who the stakeholders are that are affected, and where you see it fitting into different types of areas and clusters and groups of people. And then we have the last canvas, because I've only got to think about a minute, which is called a rapid planning canvas. And this is a great way to kind of do the last part of our process. So once you've kind of prototyped your idea, it's then really a case of being able to present it. And we use this canvas as a way to kind of present your idea, really. So once you've tested it and you've kind of been making your prototype and however that may look in your groups, we then use this rapid planning canvas to be able to jot down and give a bit more detail on what the actual groups have achieved. And as you can see, Clayton has kindly you've translated, haven't you, what some of the words are, but it's you know, trying to understand who the users are, what's the name of the actual solution you've got. So it's really presenting the solution at this point. What could go wrong, some of the costs to consider to make it actually happen. And I think it's important to say the beauty of STEAMhouse is it's really a space to do all this innovation activity. So it's a space to really generate new ideas and thinking. But then we have our production space, which is to take these ideas that have been disrupted and kind of thought through, to take them into a production space, to really put a bit more detail around, to actually work on actually producing something that that can then be, you know, shown and displayed as in different types of materials, which is really interesting. So it's got the innovation space and then the production space. So I think what we'll do is we're going to take some of these toolkits into the next session and maybe go through some of them with you. But for now, hopefully you'll have some questions to be able to share with us. And I hope that wasn't too fast and rushed. Thank you.